dollars fit in? Lou Pape was too fed up with the whole thing to discuss it with me. He just gave me the weary eye and said, "You're writing this too hard, Mark. The guy was talking from fever. How do I know what figures and what doesn't when I'm dealing with insanity or delirium?" "But you admit there's plenty about these cases that doesn't figure." "Sure. Did you take a look at the condition the world is in lately? Why should these old people be any exception?" I couldn't blame him. He pulled me in on the cases with plenty of trouble to himself, just to do me a favor. Now he was fed up. I guess it wasn't even that. He thought I was ruining myself, at least financially and maybe worse, by trying to run down the problem. He said he'd be glad to see me any time and gas about anything, or help me with whatever might be bothering me, if he could, but not these cases anymore. He told me to lay off them, and then he left me on my own. I don't know what he could have done, actually. I didn't need him to go through the want ads with me, which I was doing every day, figuring there might be something in the ravings about an ad. I spent more time than I liked checking those slanted at old people, only to find they were supposed to become messengers and such. One brought me to an old brownstone 5-story house in the East 80s. I got online with the rest of the applicants. There were men and women, all decrepit, all looking badly in need of money, and waited my turn. My face was lined with collodion wrinkles, and I wore an antique shiny suit and run-down shoes. I didn't look more prosperous or any younger than they did. I finally came up to the woman who was doing the interviewing. She sat behind a plain office desk down in the main floor hall with a pile of application cards in front of her and a ballpoint pen in one strong, slender hand. She had red hair with gold lights in it and eyes so pale blue that they would have seemed the same color as the whites if she'd been on the stage. Her face would have been beautiful, except for her rigid control of expression. She smiled abruptly, shut it off just like that, looked me over with all the impersonality and penetration of an X-ray from the soles to the bald head, exactly as she'd done with the others. But that skin, if it was as perfect as that all over her slim, stiffly erect, proudly shaped body, she had no business off the stage. "Name, address, previous occupation, social security number?" she asked in a voice with good clarity, resonance, and diction. She wrote it all down while I gave the information to her. Then she asked me for references, and I mentioned Sergeant Lou Pape. "Fine," she said. "We'll get in touch with you if anything comes up. Don't call us, we'll call you." I hung around to see who'd be picked. There was only one, an old man, 2 ahead of me in the line, who had no social security number, no references, not even any relatives or friends she could have checked up on him with. Damn. Of course that was what she wanted. Hadn't all the starvation cases been people without social security, references, either no friends and relatives or those they'd lost track of? I'd pulled a blooper, but how was I to know until too late? Well, there was a way of making it right. When it was good and dark that evening, I stood on the corner and watched the lights in the brownstone house. The ones on the first 2 floors went out, leaving only those on the 3rd and 4th. Closed for the day or open for business. I got into a building a few doors down by pushing a button and waiting until the buzzer answered, then racing up to the roof while some man yelled down the stairs to find out who was there. I crossed the tops of the 2 houses between and went down the fire escape. It wasn't easy, though not as tough as you might imagine. The fact is that I'm a whole year younger than Lou Pape, even if I could play his grandpa professionally. I still have muscles left, and I used them to get down the fire escape at the rear of the house. The 4th floor room I looked into had some kind of wire mesh cage and some hooded machinery. Nobody there. The 3rd floor room was the redhead's. She was coming out of the bathroom with a terrycloth bathrobe and a towel turban on when I looked in. She slid the robe off and began dusting herself with powder. That skin did cover her. She turned and moved toward a vanity against the wall that I was on the other side of. The next thing I knew, the window was flung open and she had a gun on me. "Come right in, Mr. Weldon, isn't it?" she said in that completely controlled voice of hers. One day her control would crack, I thought irrelevantly, and the pieces would be found from Dallas to North Carolina. "I had an idea you seemed more curious than was justified by a help wanted ad." "Man my age doesn't get to see many pretty girls," I told her, making my own voice crack pathetically in a senile whinny. She motioned me into the room. When I was inside, I saw a light over the window blinking red. It stopped the moment I was in the room, a silent burglar alarm. She let her pale blue eyes wash insolently over me. "A man your age can see all the pretty girls he wants to. You're not old." "And you use a rinse," I retorted. She ignored it. "I specifically advertised for old people. Why did you apply?" It had happened so abruptly that I hadn't had a chance to use the Stanislavski method to feel old in the presence of a beautiful nude woman. I don't even know if it would have worked. Nothing's perfect. I needed a job awful bad, I answered sullenly, knowing it sounded like an ad lib. She smiled with more contempt than humor. You had a job, Mr. Weldon. You were very busy trying to find out why senile psychotics starve themselves to death. How did you know that? I asked, startled. A little investigation of my own. I also happen to know you didn't tell your friend Sergeant Pape that you were going to be here tonight. That was a fact, too. I hadn't felt sure enough that I'd found the answer to call him about it. Looking at the gun in her steady hand, I was sorry I hadn't. But you did find out I own this building, that my name is May Roberts, and that I'm the daughter of the late Dr. Anthony Roberts, the physicist, she continued. Is there anything else you want me to tell you about yourself? I know enough already. I'm more interested in you and the starvation cases. If you weren't connected with them, you wouldn't have known I was investigating them. That's obvious, isn't it? She reached for a cigarette on the vanity and used a lighter with her free hand. The big mirror gave me another view of her lovely body, but that was beginning to interest me less than the gun. I thought of making a grab for it. There was too much distance between us, though, and she knew better than to take her eyes off me while she was lighting up. I'm not afraid of professional detectives, Mr. Weldon. They deal only with facts, and every one of them will draw the same conclusions from a given set of circumstances. I don't like amateurs. They guess too much. They don't stick to reality. The result, her pale eyes chilled and her shapely mouth went hard, is that they are likely to get too close to the truth. I wanted to smoke myself, but I wasn't willing to make a move toward the pipe in my pocket. I may be close to the truth, Miss Roberts, but I don't know what the devil it is. I still don't know how you're tied in with the senile psychotics or why they starve with all that money. You could let me go and I wouldn't have a thing on you. She glanced down at herself and laughed for real for the first time. You wouldn't, would you? On the other hand, you know where I'm working from and could nag Sergeant Pape into getting a search warrant. It wouldn't incriminate me, but it would be inconvenient. I don't care to be inconvenienced. Which means what? You want to find out my connection with senile psychotics? I intend to show you. How? She gestured dangerously with the gun. Turn your face to the wall and stay that way while I get dressed. Make one attempt to turn around before I tell you to, and I'll shoot you. You're guilty of housebreaking, you know. It would be a little inconvenient for me to have an investigation, but not as inconvenient as for you. I faced the wall, feeling my stomach braid itself into a tight, painful knot of fear. Of what? I didn't know yet, only that old people who had something to do with her died of starvation. I wasn't old, but that didn't seem very comforting. She was the most frigid, calculating, deadly woman I'd ever met. That alone was enough to scare hell out of me. And there was the problem of what she was capable of. Hearing the sounds of her dressing behind me, I wanted to lunge around and rush her, taking a chance that she might be too busy pulling on a girdle or reaching back to fasten a bra to have the gun in her hand. It was a suicidal impulse, and I gave it up instantly. Other women might compulsively finish concealing themselves before snatching up the gun. Not her. All right, she said at last. I faced her. She was wearing coveralls that, if anything, emphasized the curves of her figure. She had a sort of babushka that covered her red hair and kept it in place, the kind of thing women workers used to wear in factories during the war. She had looked lethal with nothing on but a gun and a hard expression. She looked like a sentence of execution now. Open that door, turn to the right, and go upstairs, she told me, indicating directions with the gun. I went. It was the longest, most anxious short walk I've ever taken. She ordered me to open a door on the 4th floor, and we were inside the room I'd seen from the fire escape. The mesh cage seemed like a torture chamber to me, the hooded motors designed to shoot an agonizing current through my emaciating body. You going to do to me what you did to the old man you hired today? I probed, hoping for an answer that would really answer. She flipped on the switch that started the motors, and there was a shrill, menacing whine. The wire mesh of the cage began blurring oddly, as if vibrating like the tines of a tuning fork. You've been an unexpected nuisance, Weldon, she said above the motors. I never thought you'd get this far, but as long as you have, we might as well both benefit by it. Benefit? I repeated. Both of us? She opened the drawer of a work table and pulled out a stack of envelopes held with a rubber band.